In a blinding snowstorm, a billionaire spotted an 8-year-old boy shielding 3 babies with his tiny body. Frozen, desperate, and whispering, "Please don't cry." One moment of courage sparked a rescue that would change their lives forever and teach the billionaire what love truly means. Don't scroll, this is a story of heart, hope, and the power of kindness. Welcome back to Hearts and Billions. Like, subscribe, and share this story if you believe kindness can change the world. Let's dive in. Snow fell like a blanket over the small town, each flake drifting down slowly, quietly, until the world seemed hushed and empty. Streetlights glowed faintly through the swirling white, their beams cutting across the darkness in soft, trembling halos. Storefronts were shuttered, windows dark, and not a soul moved along the icy sidewalks. It was the kind of night when even stray animals sought shelter, when even the bravest people chose warmth over the biting cold. But high above the silent streets, black storm clouds gathered, thick and heavy, promising more snow, more wind, more danger. Inside his heated mansion on the hill, billionaire Marcus Drake looked out the window, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. He barely registered the storm. His mind was lost in spreadsheets and phone calls that never seemed to end. He was used to storms, the kind that rattled markets. Not rooftops. He didn't fear the cold, he never had to. Far below him, the town was a maze of snow-covered alleys and darkened houses. And in one of those alleys, something unthinkable was happening. 8-year-old Liam was trudging through waist-deep snow, a baby strapped to his chest with a tattered scarf, another clutched in each frozen arm. His boots had holes, his socks were soaked, and every step sent a jolt of pain through his tiny feet. The storm howled around him, stinging his face with icy needles. Each breath came out in ragged white clouds, but Liam never slowed down. He pressed on through drifts that reached his chest, his eyes squinting against the wind, whispering softly to the babies, "Don't cry, please don't cry, I'll keep you warm." Snowflakes clung to the babies' eyelashes. Their whimpers grew weaker as the cold crept in. Liam scanned the empty street desperately, but every house was dark, every window shut tight. He knocked on doors, but no one answered. His voice, hoarse and shaking, was swallowed by the storm. The world around him felt endless and white, no landmarks, no paths, just swirling snow. Liam's arms ached, his legs burned. But he knew he couldn't stop. Stopping meant giving up, and giving up meant death for his baby sisters and brother. That was unthinkable. He stumbled to a park bench, half buried in snow, and dropped to his knees, gathering the babies close, wrapping his thin coat around all 3. The bench offered no shelter, but it was the only place he could rest for a moment. He pressed his body over the babies, using his own warmth to shield them as the wind howled louder, shaking the bare trees like skeletons. Snow began to pile over them, burying them slowly. Liam whispered stories he barely remembered, his voice cracking with exhaustion. Once upon a time, there was a brave knight who never let his family down. He closed his eyes, his breaths growing shallow. He prayed silently, his last hope fading like the light of the storm-hidden moon. And somewhere far down the road, the headlights of a black SUV glowed faintly through the blizzard, cutting across the white night, moving closer. Marcus Drake's luxury SUV crawled down the deserted street, tires crunching through thick layers of snow. His driver, Thomas, gripped the wheel tightly, eyes straining to see through the swirling storm. Inside, Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the back seat. The warmth of the car did little to ease the coldness in his heart, a coldness that had settled there long ago. He was a man who had everything, wealth, power, a mansion, filled with priceless art. But in moments like this, driving through a town he barely noticed, he felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. His phone buzzed with messages about deals and deadlines, but he ignored it, eyes drifting to the frozen world outside. A sudden movement caught his attention. Between the gusts of snow, he glimpsed something strange, a small, hunched figure moving awkwardly along the roadside. Marcus leaned forward, squinting through the frost-laced window. The figure staggered sideways, nearly toppling into a snowbank, before catching itself and trudging on. "Thomas, slow down," Marcus ordered, his voice low but firm. The SUV rolled to a stop, engine rumbling quietly in the otherwise silent night. The windshield wipers beat back the snow, revealing the figure more clearly, a boy, no older than 8, stumbling through the storm, his thin arms wrapped tightly around 3 bundles, babies. Marcus realized with a shock. Their tiny faces peeked out from blankets soaked with snow. Marcus felt his chest tighten painfully. Memories flashed in his mind, flashes of a childhood spent hungry and cold, of nights spent curled in doorways, praying someone would notice. He had sworn he'd never be powerless again, and yet here he was, staring at a child who reminded him exactly how powerless he once was. Liam lifted his head, eyes wide and glassy with exhaustion. He swayed on his feet, the babies whimpering softly against his chest. He opened his mouth as if to call out, but no sound came. His lips were pale, his face nearly blue. Marcus threw open the car door, icy wind slamming into him. Snow blew into the car as he stepped into the storm, striding toward the boy without hesitation. His expensive shoes sank into the snow, but he barely noticed. As he reached Liam, he saw the boy's eyes flicker with hope. Then fear, then desperate relief. The child's knees buckled, and he fell forward. Marcus lunged, catching him and the babies in his arms before they hit the ground. He pressed the children close, feeling how cold they were, so small, so fragile. "I've got you," Marcus whispered hoarsely, his voice cracking. "You're safe now, I promise." For the first time in years, Marcus Drake felt the warmth of purpose flood his frozen heart. And as snow continued to fall around them, he realized this moment would change everything. Marcus gathered Liam and the 3 babies into his arms, the boy's small body limp with exhaustion. The babies' cries were thin and weak, their tiny faces pinched from the biting cold. Snowflakes clung to their eyelashes, melting into tear tracks on their cheeks. Thomas rushed from the SUV, holding the back door wide. "Sir, hurry," he called, voice shaking with urgency. Marcus stepped carefully, shielding the children from the howling wind with his coat. His shoes slipped on the ice, but he kept his grip firm. As he ducked into the warm SUV, the babies whimpered louder, sensing the sudden change from freezing air to the car's heat. The door slammed shut behind them, muffling the roar of the storm. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. Marcus laid Liam gently across the seat, pulling the babies close to his chest. He could feel their tiny hearts beating rapidly, the cold still clinging stubbornly to their fragile bodies. "Turn up the heat, Thomas, as high as it goes," Marcus ordered, voice low but urgent. The driver nodded, fumbling with the controls until warm air blasted into the cabin. Liam stirred, eyelids fluttering weakly. His cracked lips parted. "Please, don't let them die," he whispered, voice barely audible. Marcus's heart twisted at the raw, desperate plea. He brushed snow from Liam's hair, his hands trembling. "They won't," he said firmly. "I swear it, you're all safe now." The babies' cries softened as warmth seeped into their cold limbs. One let out a hiccup, another a tiny sigh, as if they knew they were finally out of danger. Thomas glanced in the rearview mirror, eyes wide. "Sir, the hospital is 15 minutes away," he said, voice tight with fear. Marcus shook his head. "No, drive to my estate. My doctor can be there faster than an ambulance. And I want them warm now, not sitting on a gurney waiting in line." Thomas hesitated only a second before nodding sharply. The SUV lurched forward, tires spinning before gripping the icy road. They sped through the deserted streets, headlights cutting through the blizzard. Marcus cradled the babies closer, his coat wrapped around all 3. Liam's head rested against his shoulder, the boy's shallow breaths warming his neck. Marcus glanced down at the small faces pressed against him, fierce determination lighting his eyes. "Hold on," he whispered to them, voice choked with emotion. "Just a little longer." Outside, the storm raged on, snow blowing and angry, twisting gusts, but inside the SUV, a fragile warmth spread, the fragile warmth of life, of hope, and of a bond that was only beginning to form. The SUV tore through the snowy streets, tires skidding slightly with every turn. Thomas gripped the wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white. His eyes darted constantly between the road and the blizzard swirling outside the windshield. Inside the cabin, the air grew warmer, fogging the windows. Marcus sat with his arms around Liam and the babies, the boy's head resting on his chest, the baby's tiny hands gripping his coat. Each baby let out small, raspy breaths, their chests rising unevenly, but they were alive, and Marcus was determined to keep them that way. "Stay awake, Liam," Marcus urged, his voice gentle but firm. He shook the boy lightly, afraid he might slip away into the darkness of sleep. "Talk to me, tell me your name again." Liam's eyelids fluttered open, his voice a thin whisper. Liam." His teeth chattered so violently he could barely speak. "The babies, they're my sisters and brother." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. "You did something brave, Liam. You kept them safe. I'm proud of you," he said, his voice low, thick with emotion he hadn't let himself feel in years. The SUV's headlights pierced through the snow, revealing familiar roads leading out of town. Marcus's estate was just beyond the next ridge, a sprawling mansion hidden behind iron gates. As they drove, he pressed the babies tighter against his chest, feeling the warmth returning to their small bodies. One baby let out a soft whimper, eyes opening just enough to meet his gaze, before closing again in exhausted sleep. Thomas glanced back, voice shaking. "Sir, the bridge ahead, it looks icy. We'll have to go slow or we'll skid." Marcus nodded grimly, brushing a tear from Liam's cheek. He could see the boy's skin regaining a hint of color, but the cold still clung to him like a shadow. "Do whatever it takes, Thomas," he said, "but don't stop. They need warmth, food, and help now." As they crossed the bridge, the SUV slipped sideways. Tires screaming, Thomas fought the wheel. Heart hammering, the babies cried out in frightened wails, and Liam groaned softly, his body jolting in Marcus's arms. But Thomas steadied the car, steering them safely across. Marcus let out a shaky breath, hugging the children closer. "You're okay. You're all okay," he whispered over and over, his voice soft yet unbreakable. A mile ahead, the tall, wrought-iron gates of Marcus's estate loomed through the snow, security lights glowing dimly in the storm. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt the gates weren't just guarding his home. They were waiting to welcome these children he was already beginning to love. As Thomas pulled up to the tall iron gates of the estate, Marcus leaned forward and punched in the security code with shaking fingers. The gates groaned open, snow crunching under the SUV's tires as they rolled up the long, winding driveway lined with frosted evergreens. Lights from the mansion glowed softly through the storm, golden and warm, a stark contrast to the icy night. Inside the car, Liam stirred weakly. His eyes blinked open, glassy with exhaustion, and he looked up at Marcus with a mix of fear and fragile hope. "Are we safe now?" he rasped. Marcus swallowed hard, brushing snowflakes from the boy's tangled hair. "Yes," he said firmly, voice cracking despite himself. "You're safe, I swear it." As they approached the mansion, staff members in thick coats hurried onto the snow-covered steps. One of the maids gasped when she saw Marcus emerge from the car, cradling 3 bundled babies and a limp, half-frozen boy. Another covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. They rushed to help, but Marcus waved them back. "Bring blankets, hot water, and call Dr. Bennett. Tell him it's an emergency," Marcus ordered. His voice carried the weight of command, but also something different, something raw, almost pleading. He stepped carefully across the icy drive, Liam's small arms instinctively tightening around his neck. The babies whimpered softly, their tiny cries rising above the howling wind. Snowflakes swirled around them like confetti, but Marcus barely felt the cold anymore. All he could see were 4 lives depending on him, 4 lives he was determined to save. As he crossed the threshold into the grand entry hall, warmth washed over them. The staff quickly closed the heavy doors behind them, shutting out the storm's roar. The polished marble floors gleamed under soft lights, but the beauty of the mansion felt empty to Marcus until now. It felt alive only because these children were here. Liam lifted his head slightly, eyes scanning the massive space, the glittering chandelier, the towering staircase, the priceless paintings. His voice was barely a whisper. "This is your house." Marcus looked down at him, his own eyes stinging. "It's our house now," he said softly. And in that moment, as he carried Liam and the babies deeper into the warm, safe heart of the mansion, he realized he had just witnessed a kind of courage he had never known, not in boardrooms or battles for wealth, but in a child willing to give everything for those he loved. The staff hurried to prepare the grand living room, stoking the fireplace until it roared with heat. Soft blankets were spread out on the plush rug, and steaming bowls of broth and warm milk appeared on silver trays. The air filled with the scent of cedar and firewood, wrapping the room in comforting warmth. Marcus lowered Liam gently onto a thick blanket closest to the fire. The boy's limbs were stiff, his clothes frozen in places. He winced as Marcus peeled off his wet coat and boots, revealing bruised knees and blue-tinged toes. The babies, now lying side by side in soft blankets, let out weak, pitiful cries. Liam's eyelids fluttered as he struggled to stay conscious. His voice was rough and ragged. "Please don't let them die," he whispered, each word a gasp of desperation. His eyes locked onto Marcus's with a raw intensity that pierced straight through the billionaire's guarded heart. Marcus knelt beside him, gripping his small hand tightly. "They won't die," he said fiercely, leaning close so Liam could hear him over the crackling fire. "I promise you they're safe now. You're all safe." The boy's eyes flicked to the babies, then back to Marcus. Tears pooled along his lashes, spilling down cheeks flushed with fever. I tried so hard to keep them warm, but it got so cold, I thought, his voice cracked into a sob. Marcus felt a sharp pain in his chest. He cupped Liam's face gently. "You were brave," he said, his own voice trembling. "Braver than most men I know. You saved them, Liam. You did everything you could. The babies whimpered louder, as if echoing their brother's fear. Marcus quickly picked up the tiniest, wrapping her snugly in a soft blanket before placing her against his chest. He did the same for the others, one by one, holding them close so they could feel his warmth and heartbeat. Footsteps thundered down the grand staircase, and Dr. Bennett, a kind-eyed man with silver hair, burst into the room carrying a black medical bag. His gaze swept over the scene, widening as he took in the frostbitten children and the billionaire on his knees by the fire. "Dear God," Dr. Bennett whispered. He knelt quickly, pulling out stethoscopes and syringes, barking instructions to the staff. "Get warm towels, bring glucose solution, keep them awake." Liam's small hand clutched at Marcus's sleeve, even as his eyes drifted closed. "Don't leave, please, don't leave them," he murmured. Marcus swallowed hard, pressing his hand over Liam's. "I won't," he promised in a hoarse whisper. "I'm right here, I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Dr. Bennett moved quickly, checking pulses, shining a small light into the baby's eyes, and placing warm compresses on their tiny feet and hands. His brow furrowed deeply. "They're severely hypothermic," he said, voice low but urgent. "If you hadn't brought them in when you did, they wouldn't have lasted another hour." Marcus's breath caught in his chest as he cradled the smallest baby against his shoulder. She let out a thin, tired cry that broke his heart. He rocked her gently, murmuring words he didn't know he remembered how to say. "SHH. You're safe now, you're going to be okay." Liam, propped up with pillows by the fire, kept his eyes on Marcus and his siblings, fighting to stay awake. His lips trembled as he tried to speak. You really won't leave them." Marcus moved closer, placing the baby softly beside Liam so he could see her breathing steady and slow. "I promise," he said, his voice firm but thick with emotion. "I will never leave you or your brother and sisters. You're not alone anymore." For the first time, Liam's tense shoulders sagged slightly, relief washing over his pale face. Tears spilled from his eyes, glistening in the flickering firelight. Outside the grand windows, snow still fell in thick. Silent waves, but the storm was losing its rage. The wind no longer screamed, it sighed, almost as if the world itself was letting out a breath it had been holding. Thomas reappeared with warm towels and fresh clothes. He helped Dr. Bennett wrap the babies tighter, then turned to Marcus, eyes shining. "Sir, I've known you a long time, but I've never seen you like this," he said softly. Marcus looked down at Liam, his hand resting protectively on the boy's head. "I've never felt like this," he admitted in a low voice, barely audible over the crackle of the fire. "They remind me of what I lost, of who I used to be." Liam's eyes fluttered closed, but not from the cold this time. It was exhaustion finally catching up. Safe in the warmth of the mansion, his breathing was slow but strong, his arms still wrapped loosely around the blankets holding his siblings. As Dr. Bennett finished checking each baby, he placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. "They'll make it," he said with a gentle smile. "You got to them just in time." Marcus looked down at the 4 small lives nestled before the fire and felt something shift deep inside him. A resolve he hadn't felt in decades. He realized that, in carrying them to safety through the storm, he had also carried himself back to something he thought he'd lost forever, his heart. As the storm outside finally settled into a gentle snowfall, the mansion grew quiet. The crackling fire bathed the living room in a golden glow, casting dancing shadows across the marble floors and ornate woodwork. It should have felt like any other night in Marcus's grand home, but tonight, it felt different, it felt alive. Liam slept soundly, curled under thick blankets near the hearth. His small chest rose and fell steadily, his face no longer pinched with fear. The 3 babies lay in a makeshift crib made of plush pillows and warm towels, tiny hands, occasionally twitching as they dreamed. Each soft sigh and quiet coo filled the room with hope. Marcus sat on the rug beside them, his back resting against the velvet sofa. He couldn't bring himself to leave. He reached out every few minutes to gently touch each baby's cheek, feeling the warmth returning to their skin. Every time he brushed a wisp of hair from Liam's forehead, a flood of relief coursed through him. The staff moved quietly, bringing bowls of warm milk, soft cloths, and extra blankets. Some paused to kneel beside the children, eyes wide with wonder at the boy who'd kept 3 babies alive in a deadly storm. Whispers drifted through the room. How did he do it? He's just a child himself. They're so lucky he found them. Marcus listened but didn't look up. His focus was fixed on the children. He felt an aching tenderness he hadn't known in years, a feeling that both scared and comforted him. He realized with a start that he wanted them here. He needed them here. A soft hand rested on his shoulder. Marcus looked up into the kind eyes of Mrs. Harris. His longtime housekeeper. She offered a small, knowing smile. "They're going to be all right." "Sir," she said softly, "and so are you." Marcus swallowed hard, surprised by the lump in his throat. He reached up and squeezed her hand gratefully. "Thank you," he managed to say. Outside, the snow slowed to a quiet drift, blanketing the estate in peaceful white. The wind no longer howled. The night had turned serene. The mansion, which once echoed with emptiness, now hummed with soft baby noises, warm laughter from relieved staff, and the steady breathing of a sleeping child. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like his house wasn't just a fortress. It was a home. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows, making the mansion glow softly in shades of gold and ivory. The storm was gone, leaving a quiet, crystalline world outside, branches heavy with fresh snow, rooftops glistening under a pale blue sky. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the faint scent of cedar from the crackling fireplace. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, with a mug of coffee gone cold in his hands, eyes fixed on the living room where Liam still slept peacefully. The babies were awake now, tiny voices cooing and gurgling as they kicked their feet in soft blankets. Mrs. Harris gently rocked them in her arms, smiling through tears of relief. Dr. Bennett packed away his medical bag, his face lined with worry. He settled into a chair across from Marcus. Clearing his throat, "We need to talk." He began carefully. "These children are severely malnourished. Their injuries suggest they've been on their own for days." Marcus's jaw clenched. "Days," he echoed, voice low, shaking with anger at the thought of children left alone in a deadly storm. Dr. Bennett nodded grimly. "Frostbite, dehydration. They're lucky the boy kept them warm at all. He's the reason they survived." As if on cue, Liam stirred in the living room. His eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding his face as he took in the towering ceilings, the grand fireplace, and the staff bustling quietly around him. He tried to sit up but fell back with a soft cry of pain. Marcus was at his side in moments, kneeling by the couch. "Easy. Liam," he said softly, "you're safe. Do you remember what happened?" Liam looked up, eyes wide and glassy. He glanced at the babies, then back at Marcus. His lower lip trembled. "We were so cold," he whispered. I thought they were going to die. I had to keep them warm. I promised Mama I'd protect them." Marcus took Liam's small, shaking hand in his own. "You did more than anyone could have asked," he said, voice hoarse with emotion. "You saved them. You're a hero." Tears filled Liam's eyes. "Mama. She left. She said she'd come back. But she didn't." His voice cracked into a sob. I waited so long." Marcus pulled him into a gentle embrace, holding him close as the boy's thin shoulders shook with grief. He rested his chin on Liam's head, eyes burning with fierce determination. "I'm going to find her, Liam," he vowed quietly. "I don't know what happened, but I promise you I'll bring your mother home. And until then, you and your brother and sisters will never be alone again." And for the first time since the night before, Liam's sobs slowed. He leaned into Marcus's arms, clutching him like the father he'd never had. Liam lay curled on the soft couch, wrapped in a thick blanket that smelled of fresh laundry. His eyes were red and puffy, his small hands twisting nervously in the folds of fabric. Across from him, Marcus sat on the edge of a chair, leaning forward, giving the boy his full attention. "Can you tell me what happened?" "Liam," Marcus asked softly, his voice warm but steady. "Anything you can remember will help me find your mother." Liam's eyes flicked up, then back down to his lap. His voice was a thin whisper. "Mama was sick. She started coughing so much. She couldn't get out of bed. We ran out of food, and the heat stopped working. She told me to keep the babies warm, to take care of them. She said she'd go get help." He swallowed hard, tears shining in his eyes. "But she never came back. I waited for her. I waited all night, then the next day. Then it got so cold, I couldn't stay inside anymore. I thought if I walked to town, maybe someone would see us, maybe someone would help." Marcus's throat felt tight, his heart breaking as he pictured the terrified boy huddling with his siblings in a dark, freezing house. He reached out and gently took Liam's cold hand in his own. "You did everything right," Marcus said firmly. His eyes locked on the boys. "You took care of them, you kept them alive. That's what a hero does." Liam's face twisted, a sob escaping his chest. "I was so scared," he whispered. "I thought we were going to die." Marcus pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly as he rubbed his back. "You're safe now," he murmured, "and I will never let you feel that alone again." Mrs. Harris stood quietly by the doorway, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Even Thomas, who hovered near the stairs, looked away to hide the tears in his eyes. As the crackling fire cast warm light across the room, Marcus gently pulled back, meeting Liam's gaze. "Liam, I promise you, I will find your mother. And until then, this is your home. You and your brother and sisters will be loved here. You'll never go hungry or cold again." For a moment, Liam simply stared, as if he couldn't believe the words. Then his small arms wrapped around Marcus's neck, hugging him with every ounce of strength he had left. Outside the tall windows, the sun rose higher, turning the world from silver and gray to sparkling white. And in that quiet room, the boy who had carried his siblings through a deadly storm finally let himself hope. Later that afternoon, as the babies napped peacefully in a cozy nursery the staff had prepared, Marcus stood alone in his study, staring out the tall windows at the glittering snow. Sunlight bounced off the white landscape, blindingly bright, but inside, a storm churned in his chest. His reflection glared back at him from the glass, the face of a man who had spent years building walls of stone and steel around his heart. The man who had sworn he'd never be powerless again after clawing his way up from nothing. And yet, watching Liam trembling in the snow the night before had ripped those walls down in an instant. Marcus pressed a hand against the cold window pane. Memories he thought he'd buried came rushing back. The nights he spent as a child sleeping on park benches, the hunger gnawing so deeply he could barely stand, the countless times he'd been ignored by people in warm coats who walked right past him. He remembered his mother, her hollow eyes, her shaking hands, how she had disappeared one day and never returned. I was him, Marcus thought bitterly. I was that boy. He clenched his jaw, breath fogging the window. The old pain twisted inside him like a blade. For so long, he had believed that building a fortress of money and power would keep him safe. Safe from loss. Safe from hurt, but it hadn't. It had only made him alone. A quiet knock pulled him back to the present. Mrs. Harris entered, holding a tray with a cup of warm tea. Her eyes were gentle but searching. "Sir," she said softly, "Liam is awake again. He keeps asking for you." Marcus turned, his expression raw. "I failed him," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I failed so many children like him. All my wealth, all these walls, and none of it stopped him from nearly freezing to death on my doorstep." Mrs. Harris set the tray down and stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "You can't change the past, sir," she said kindly, her voice thick with emotion. "But you can change their future. And I've never seen you fight so hard for anything as you have for those children." Marcus looked down at her hand, then back toward the nursery door. The baby's soft cries drifted faintly through the hall, and he could hear Liam's small voice calling out, "Mr. Marcus, are you still here?" He straightened, drawing in a shaky breath. "Yes," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "Yes, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." He stepped out of the study, each stride carrying the weight of old pain, but also a new purpose. A promise that no child under his roof would ever feel abandoned again. Marcus stepped quietly into the nursery, a bright, airy room now filled with life. Warm sunlight spilled across the wooden floors, and a soft lullaby played from a small speaker. The babies dozed peacefully in 3 bassinets arranged in a semicircle near the window. Wrapped snugly in soft blankets, Liam sat propped up in a chair by their side, one hand resting protectively on the nearest crib. He looked up as Marcus entered, his eyes lighting with relief. "You came back," he whispered, voice raspy but stronger than before. Marcus crossed the room in a few strides and knelt beside Liam's chair. "Of course I did," he said firmly, reaching out to gently squeeze the boy's hand. "I promised you I wouldn't leave." Liam's eyes grew misty. "I thought. People always leave," he murmured, voice small and full of old hurt. Marcus's heart ached. He brushed a lock of hair from Liam's forehead, his own eyes wet. "Not this time," he said softly, "not ever again." He looked at the babies, their tiny chests rising and falling steadily. Each little face was so peaceful, so innocent, so unaware of how close they'd come to losing everything. Marcus felt a fierce protectiveness swell inside him, stronger than any ambition or deal he'd ever chased. "I've already started making calls," Marcus continued, his voice firm now, steady like a rock. "Investigators will find your mother. I'll hire the best doctors if she's hurt, and even if it takes days or weeks, I won't stop until we know what happened." Liam's lip trembled, but he nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Marcus reached over and picked up one of the babies. Cradling her carefully, she stirred and opened her eyes, blinking up at him with sleepy curiosity. He smiled softly, whispering, "You're safe now, you're home." Mrs. Harris appeared in the doorway, holding a stack of folded baby clothes fresh from the dryer. She paused, watching Marcus with the baby in his arms, her eyes shining with emotion. "You were meant for this, sir," she said quietly. "You were meant to save them." Marcus glanced up at her, his face resolute. "No," he said with quiet conviction. "They saved me." In that moment, surrounded by soft coos, warm sunlight, and the fragile but fierce bond he now shared with Liam and the babies, Marcus knew his life's purpose had changed forever, and he welcomed it with his whole heart. 3 days later, snow still blanketed the town, but inside the mansion, life had found a quiet rhythm. The babies were warm, fed, and giggling in their bassinets. Liam smiled more often, his color returning as he grew stronger. Marcus never left their side for long, staying close enough to comfort them at every cry or bad dream. One afternoon, Thomas hurried into the nursery. Breathless, a folder clutched tightly in his hands. "Sir," he said urgently, eyes bright, "we found her." Marcus stood, heart pounding. "Where?" Thomas handed over the folder. "An hour outside town. She was admitted to a county hospital 3 nights ago, severe pneumonia. Nearly unconscious. No ID, but her description and a locket matching Liam's stories confirmed it." Marcus's hands trembled as he read the hospital report. Memories of his own mother's last days flashed painfully in his mind. He looked at Liam, who was watching with wide, hopeful eyes. "Liam," Marcus said softly, kneeling beside him, "we found your mother, she's alive." Tears welled up instantly in Liam's eyes. "Mama," he whispered, his voice shaking with shock and joy. "Is she okay?" Marcus nodded slowly. "She's very sick, but the doctors say she's stable now. I've arranged for her to be transferred here to the best care available." Liam threw his arms around Marcus's neck, sobbing into his shoulder. "I knew you'd find her, I knew it." Marcus held him tight, blinking back his own tears. "You were so brave, Liam. You gave her the chance to come back to you." Hours later, a sleek ambulance pulled up the driveway, its lights reflecting off the snow like tiny stars. Marcus and Liam stood together on the steps as paramedics carefully lifted a frail woman onto a stretcher. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow, but her eyes fluttered open, eyes that were the same shade of brown as Liam's. "Mama," Liam cried, reaching for her hand. Her lips parted, voice barely a whisper. "Liam, my babies." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she took in the sight of her son, alive, warm, and safe. Marcus stepped forward, his voice firm but full of compassion. "You're home now," he told her gently. "Your children are safe. Rest. We'll take care of you." As the paramedics carried her inside, Liam clutched Marcus's hand tightly, his eyes shining with gratitude. For the first time, he let himself believe that his family could be whole again. And in that snowy twilight, Marcus realized that while he had saved them from the storm, they had given him something far greater, a chance to heal wounds he thought would never mend. The mansion's grand living room was quiet, except for the crackle of the fireplace. Soft snow still drifted outside, blanketing the world in peaceful white. Inside, warmth filled every corner, not just from the fire, but from the joy that now surrounded the reunited family. Liam sat beside his mother's bed in the guest suite. Marcus had turned into a private hospital room. The babies slept peacefully in bassinets nearby, their soft breaths rising and falling in the gentle glow of the bedside lamp. Mrs. Harris quietly changed tiny blankets, humming a lullaby as she worked. Liam's mother, pale but awake, reached out to stroke his cheek. Her eyes were full of tears, but her smile was radiant. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered, voice weak but filled with fierce love. Liam leaned forward, pressing his face into her hand. "I missed you so much, Mama. I kept the babies safe, just like you asked." She nodded, tears spilling freely. "You're the bravest boy I've ever known." Marcus stood quietly by the doorway, watching the reunion with a lump in his throat. His eyes flicked from the mother's thin face to Liam's joyful smile, and he felt something settle deep inside him, a peace he hadn't known in years. He stepped closer, his voice warm but steady. "Your family is safe now. You'll have everything you need to heal and to start over." The woman looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You saved my children, you saved me." Marcus shook his head, his voice husky. "Your son saved them. He risked everything for his brother and sisters. I only did what anyone should do." She reached out, grasping his hand with surprising strength. "No," she said firmly. "You saw us when no one else did. You gave us hope, you gave us a chance." Marcus swallowed hard, his other hand resting gently on Liam's shoulder. "You're family now, and family looks out for each other." The babies stirred softly in their sleep, as if sensing the warmth of the love filling the room. The fire crackled, casting soft shadows that danced along the walls. Outside the windows, stars began to peek through the parting clouds. The storm long gone. Snow glistened under the moonlight like a promise of new beginnings. In that quiet, tender moment, surrounded by soft baby sighs and the peaceful breaths of a reunited family, Marcus knew that his mansion had finally become a true home, a place filled not with cold silence, but with laughter, warmth, and love. Days passed, and the mansion that once echoed with empty halls now pulsed with life. The babies' giggles rang through the grand rooms as they were carried from the nursery to the living room, their tiny hands reaching for every warm face. Liam's mother grew stronger each day, her cheeks regaining color and her eyes shining with gratitude. Marcus took time each morning to check on them all, sometimes feeding a baby himself or helping Liam build blanket forts near the fireplace. His staff, once reserved and distant, found themselves laughing and cooing at the children, their hearts softening with every tiny giggle. One snowy evening, the family gathered in the grand dining room. The long table, once used for cold, lonely dinners, now held bowls of warm soup, soft bread, and bright flowers Liam had picked with Mrs. Harris. Liam's mother sat at the head of the table, tears shining in her eyes as she looked at her children, alive and safe. Marcus raised his glass of sparkling water, his deep voice carrying across the candlelit room. "Tonight," he said softly, "we celebrate a brave boy, his beautiful siblings, and the unbreakable love of a mother who never stopped fighting for them." Liam blushed, ducking his head as everyone clapped and cheered. His mother reached for Marcus's hand across the table. "You've given us more than I ever dreamed possible," she whispered. "You gave us a home, a future, a chance." Marcus squeezed her hand, his eyes misty. "You gave me a family," he replied. "You reminded me what truly matters." Outside the tall windows, snow fell gently under a sky full of stars. The mansion glowed with soft lights, laughter spilling out into the night. For the first time, Marcus felt something he hadn't in decades: peace. He realized he was no longer alone, and he never would be again. And so, in a house once filled with silence and shadows, there now lived a boy who had shown the world what courage looked like. 3 babies who would grow up surrounded by love, a mother who never gave up, and a billionaire who discovered that the richest life is one shared with those who need you most. The blizzard became only a memory, but the love it uncovered grew stronger every day. The boy who once shielded his siblings in the snow found warmth, safety, and a father figure who would never let him go. And in a mansion that used to stand cold and empty, laughter now echoed in every room, proof that even a single act of courage can change lives forever. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe for more tales of hope and kindness.